Hi everyone, we are getting ready for our live today for the Sanctuary Hub. My guest is going to be my friend Sheila Masterson from Star Sage Spirit and the Living Tarot podcast. And so we are going to get ready, and Willow is going to join us with her toy that recently lost an arm because she decided to eat it. And here we're gonna see if, oh my goodness, Instagram lets her join. Hopefully it does. It's been, yay, it worked.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So is Willow, apparently.
I I thought my earpods were gonna work, but apparently not. So, fine, whatever. Anyway, hi, Willow.
How's it going?
Pretty good. I mean, can't complain. The internet's being a little crazy today, but I'm actually I'm actually on Mike's hotspot, so it's fine.
It's working the hotspots, you know what is annoying though, is when it's like, oh, the hotspot's doing way better than the internet that I pay over $100 for.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly. You're like, oh, okay, good, great.
yeah, exactly. And then it's like you're like eating into the gigabytes of your data plan.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's his gigabytes, his problem. What's yours is mine, you know?
Your gigabytes are my gigabytes.
We've joined custody over them. Exactly.
How are you? How's everything going with business? Also, I guess like tell people what you do besides being my favorite ghost whisperer, literally.
So I read tarot and I do energy work, and I'm mostly focused on career work. So I do a lot of career tarot readings, whether that is having to kind of look at multiple paths that might be opening up in front of you. I know that's a lot of what I've been doing this year because a lot of people have reevaluated their values and kind of decided on a different path post COVID. And as kind of more opportunities opened up to actually work your values, which might mean having a flexible schedule or working remotely or things like that, I've kind of helped people to evaluate those things and then to look at different offers or different opportunities that might be like kind of sparking in their brain and see what each of those paths look like. And then I also do, a year ahead in career planning stuff, things like that, that I think can be really helpful. And I mean, I love talking about career stuff, and I talk about all kinds of stuff on the Living Tarot podcast, like all branches of tarot. But the reason I like career so much is because I feel like people come into it and they're always trying to marry up their like heartfelt desire for something with capitalism, which is really complicated. And it's really important to find the, I think of like the justice card, to find the sense of equity in what you can give and what you're receiving back, and also not losing too much of yourself in it. And I kind of see that as like my role is to kind of be the person that's helping you hone in on that and figure out exactly what you need in those moments.
Yes. The other thing that I really appreciate about it, other than the fact that like you between like, oh my goodness, Will, astrology with Davis and then my own personal pull that I do every year, and then your career pull, it like gives me the full picture of kind of like how to navigate, and then being able to go back when shit's going sideways or feels like it's going sideways in the middle,
Yes.
and being able to be like, oh, right, okay, this is this period that we're in, and this other period is coming up, which I find like the thing that I really appreciate about tarot is that I am somebody who A is very bad about being in the present moment, and B is thinking like 7 million ages ahead. Like I'm always planning like 5 to 10 years in the future and forgetting about I'm like mired in the day to day, but like not about like, us triple fires like to be like, oh, I made a decision 2 seconds ago and it should have been done yesterday. And it's like,
Yeah. How did I not already preempt how was I not solving this problem 5 years ago? Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things, and one of the things that really got me interested in that work too, is I like to do like Ash said, you're an Aries and a Sagittarius rising, right? Yeah. And I'm a Leo and a Sagittarius rising. So like the idea that I would not be able to do something about a problem is like a nightmare. Like that's the worst thing. And so when I kind of designed these readings, and obviously lots of people do career readings, but the way I kind of look at it is I always want to be giving people um, resources for what to do when that thing feels like it's going wrong. Or like, is this a time where you really need to fight against the tide? Or is this a time where you need to kind of like have some support, or have planned out that this is going to be a slow month. And so just like either like go to therapy to like get okay with it, to stay present, or like do a special the month before so that you don't feel quite so like constrained in that time period, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also I think it's also a little unique in tarot world, because although like yes, other people do career readings, I feel like when people are like already relying on tarot as a consistent tool in their lives, if they're not like doing daily pulls themselves, and so just kind of naturally they're looking at the role that their work is playing, a lot of folks turn to tarot for the other parts of their life, so romantic situation,
Yeah.
if there's like a friendship or familial dispute, or like just general personal life stuff. But it's and I mean, I definitely fall when I fall out of practice with my tarot, then it's usually in times where things are feeling tricky and where I'm like, oh shit, I need to like reconnect with my guides, that I reach for it. But I feel like a lot of folks don't necessarily think of using tarot A as a tool for navigating career stuff, and
Yeah.
B, navigating or using it as like a preemptive tool, like with the year aheads, where it's
Right.
like be prepared in advance for when shit starts to feel sticky, and or be able to see like, oh, there's a lot of activity that's expected to happen this month, and so like
Right.
make sure that I am prepped for that, and that like I've been getting the rest and have the food and all of those things.
Right. And I think it's like, it's so natural to plan everything else out. And like, why would you not like tend to this part of things? And again, I say I focus on career, but like nothing happens in a vacuum. So if we're talking about career, we're probably talking about your interpersonal relationships too. If you have children, are you getting the kind of support at home that you need? Do you need to hire somebody? Do you need your partner to step up? Like what does it look like? Or like, is there tension there? And how can you like resolve that? Because it's not like I'm going to ignore everything else that's there, because there are a lot of things that go into your working life, especially for people like us that run our own businesses. There is a lot wrapped up in that. And then there's also a lot of like emotional baggage of, if I fail at this thing, then I'm a terrible person. Like, and how do you like unpack that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, capitalism and the way that it equates our productivity with our worth, and that like expansive growth with no check way to do it, and like it's, I mean, capitalism in its most toxic form, which is the way that our society currently functions, is highly, highly fucked up. And especially when we are, trying to navigate doing things in a way that is more values based, that is more cognizant of the impact that we are having, then like having those kind of reference points and check-ins is super useful. But I think even for somebody who has like a normal, I put that in quotations, job where somebody else is paying their paycheck, they have like a static, like here's your schedule, whatever. It's still really beneficial. I mean, I think of the first time that I got a professional reading done was with this tarot reader in Toronto back in it must have been 2017. Yeah, it was 2017, or maybe 2016. And I was just having a really fucking hard time. It was 2017, just like generally figuring my life out. And work was a really big part of that. And we, looked at everything. And at the end of the whole reading, I had this like very natural progression through the major arcana, which was interesting. Was the sun, and it was like, okay, so regardless of all of the other shit that is like happening and is going to be over the next few months, we are ending with the sun. It is going to end up good. And it did. Like, I made a career transition that year that then ultimately wasn't that good, but it got me out of being stagnant in the place that I was at, moved me along, and then that place ended up being so toxic that it just naturally pushed into having to be my own boss because
Listen, I'm a person who always says like I need to be thrown. Like I'm not somebody who can like gracefully transition. And that's part of the reason I do this work. People are always like, I know, I know. I'm like, listen, I am not the person that's judging you for this. Like I need to be just like launched into something, kicking and screaming.
oh my God, yes. I think the other thing that I really value about you as a reader is the fact that you are also a medium. And so while you're
Yeah.
not services these days, when you're doing tarot pulls, it's very naturally like whether you want them or not. And when somebody like me who are very insistent that I really love it because I'm like, okay, not only am I getting Sheila's interpretation of the cards, but I am also going to get some heads up of like shit that I'm not paying attention to because the guides also, I think, that talk to you most loudly are also the ones that for me, I I don't necessarily feel them so directly because they are like such natural parts of my body.
Mhm.
They're trying to tell me things and I'm just not listening to them, and then they yell it at you. And
Yeah. And it's really funny because one of my teachers talked about that once because I have a guide who like almost every like spiritual friend or whatever that I've ever talked to is like, who is this woman? Like they're like always. And I'm like, really? And it like took me a really long time to notice her because like you said, it's like she's very close to me. And so now I can recognize it. But that was like one of the really funny things like early on for me is everybody would be like, who is this chick? Like what is she doing here? And I mean, I say chick loosely because like
ghost.
gender and spirituality is kind of like a joke. But I, it was just like a really funny thing because I was like, oh, why is it like that? But I do think that that happens a lot with people where it's whoever is like closest can sometimes be like the hardest to hear because there's just this weird, like it feels so much like your own energy that it's hard to like figure out where you end and that person begins. And so you can very easily explain it away as like, this is just my thought, or this is just a thing I'm thinking.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, it's like, your guide is trying to like tell you something, which I think is also, it's interesting because it's like, it's not exactly intuition because for me, I'm like, intuition is my internal compass versus my guides are external compasses basically.
Yeah.
They can be very similar in where you need to be rooting into, and also
Right.
similarly disrupted when your nervous system has your anxiety buzzing, and it's your anxiety, which
Right. And I think like often what I find is that they're like, hey, pay attention to you. Like they're not being like, hey, over here, me. They're like, hey, you need to ground, like you need to pay attention to what you're feeling, like what's going on with you.
yeah, and that's been a really interesting thing. Sorry, there's like a dog here that has floated around my nose and is but it's an interesting thing like with going to therapy and doing EMDR therapy and kind of readjusting my relationship with things like my anxiety, with things like when brain fog kicks in, and
Yeah.
is actually your body trying to tell you to tune in and you're not tuning in. And so it's just more insistent about it. And it's like
Right.
actually trying to help you. Um, and it just doesn't feel great while it's trying to help you. But if you are able to get into it enough, then it does help you to like move through whatever the thing is. Like a couple of nights
Yeah.
ago, my anxiety just decided to like take a full little journey with me, but I also needed to like address the thing that I was not addressing and was like acting like, oh yeah, no, it's okay, it's okay. And like ultimately it is okay, and I have control over what I have control of, and I don't have control over a bunch of other things, and I will navigate those things as they come up. But I did need to, have my anxiety like force me to be like, it's okay to have your freak out. You also need to acknowledge that portion of this,
Yeah.
that, and then you can be rational about it. Like, but the freaking out portion is still part of the journey.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So.
So let's dig into your definition of sanctuary after all of the,
Uh, I thought about this so much because I've been watching like some of the other calls and everything, and there's so many themes that came up with our peers and stuff as they were talking about this. But for me, I think it feels like a safe place to retreat and to be yourself. And it doesn't have to be a physical place, which I think when a lot of people think of it, that's like what they think of, like an animal sanctuary, all of those kinds of things. But I think that especially now in the world that we live in now, where every deviation that you are away from white, cisgender, healthy, neurotypical, the less sanctuary you find in the external world, the more important it is to figure out what that is for yourself and to learn how to kind of tune into it, because frankly, it's not in like capitalism wants to be sanctuary, like wants to convince us that work is sanctuary. Like this is where you are,
yeah,
safe.
material things are going to create sanctuary for you. The more,
Right.
which like is accurate in some ways, like having money
Right.
does give us more options in this system.
Right.
It doesn't, like the market can crash and all of a sudden whatever investments you had are now worth nothing, or you can,
Right.
and like having more money, especially in certain countries, can mean that you have more access to medical care, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your sickness is not going to have like a really significant impact. Like,
Right. Right. And so I think that when I was thinking about sanctuary, I was like, it really is something that we have to learn to give to ourselves, because nobody else is going to take responsibility for it. We can set ourselves up with a group of people who act as sanctuary and can be there for us, but we always have to be the ones advocating for ourselves in this way. And I think that I was thinking about it, and I was like, I think becoming an adult is really like learning how to build that sanctuary for yourself.
so Willow, go lie down. There's like a child on a scooter outside. Well,
Listen.
and then go and keep guard upstairs apparently. So okay, we should be safe.
But I feel like that's part of like what being an adult is learning to create that sanctuary for yourself, and learning when you need to like retreat there and when you need to go there and what that looks like, and being able to express that in the outside world, however that is, whether that's in your interpersonal relationships or with your job or with clients or whatever it is,
How do you, sorry, I'm like, oh, 2 seconds. My neighbor child who loves me a lot is at the gate and literally,
It's fine.
I'll be right
It's
back.
fine. Oh no.
everyone. I have a really adorable 6-year-old neighbor who, like, he's very cautious around people until he decides he likes you, and then all bets are off.
Amazing. Hi, Willow. Oh my God.
Uh, okay, so back to what we were talking about. Um, yeah, you were saying about like finding sanctuary within yourself to be able to navigate all the things.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with everything that's happened in the past couple of years, with a lot of people feeling physically unsafe, it's like particularly important to figure out like what it is that's going to help you kind of retreat and recoup and feel like you can actually be out in the world again, if you want to. If you don't want to, frankly, I kind of get it. So, you know.
Yeah, it's like it's such a tricky navigation, and I'm curious for you, like where the work that you do is very much energy work. Um,
Yeah,
and also you like have the additional layer of like ghosties coming along.
yeah.
You kind of maintain sanctuary for yourself, and how also have you kind of been navigating through the pandemic, like, you know, being able to do that work from like being in person to then having to shift digitally, and do you want to be out back in the world at this point?
Oh my gosh, so many complicated questions. I think that for me, transitioning from like in person to online actually has helped me a lot. Am much better on boundaries and timing. Not so before I had a really bad habit of like just like spending forever with clients, and like it's not that I don't want to do that, but I definitely overcommit, overgive, over, you know, all the time. And one of the things that happened when we transitioned to being fully online was that it was much easier for me to hold that boundary. And I don't even think it's because I'm like, there's a clock on my computer and I can look at it, you know, because I didn't have one in my little room here. But I think it's that I don't feel as like I feel more protective of my energy in general. And so it's easier for me with almost like that physical distance to do that. And I really saw no change in my work or how I could work with people or what I could feel from people or sense from people. Because I do energy work as well, like energy clearing and stuff like that. And even that and past life stuff and everything like that, like nothing was really shifted. It just was like a little bit of an adjustment to go be looking at a screen all day, which is again not my favorite thing, but yeah, I mean that was a big adjustment. And then I also like on a personal level had some, I mean I am chronically ill, but I had a new like fun chronic illness come up over COVID, that is not COVID related, thank God, but is annoying. And so I had like another layer of things to consider. And I think that one of the things that people who maybe are, you know, not chronically ill don't realize is that like you're constantly thinking about doctor's appointments and like how long in between. I'm in the United States where healthcare is terrible, and especially if you work for yourself and are unmarried like myself, health insurance is extremely expensive. And then you're still paying like pretty decent bills on top of that when you do get something done. And so there's kind of this constant balancing of I want to see people, I want to be social. I'm a very like social person, like Leo, Uranus, like I have Mercury, the sun, and Mars all in Leo. So like I really like people and I have a lot of friends and I like to see people. But I'm always balancing that with how safe do I feel in this scenario. And my level of risk, I think, is much lower, like risk tolerance is much lower than a lot of people's are. And I don't like, I'm not in a place where I judge people for being like, you know, I get it. Like, we've all been in the house for 2 years. Like I said, as a social person, I get it. But I also think that on the other side of it, I'll have people who kind of like look at me like, why aren't you doing more? You know, and I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to consider. And I think that that's one of the things that's really important when you think about sanctuary, because you are talking about, okay, if I'm going out and I'm doing this thing, then I always know when I'm coming back, I need to kind of have that time to deregulate and to like remind myself that I'm okay. And so I think one of the things that's been really important for me is like, I almost like plan social time now, or like around times when I know I can come back and be like calm and like not do anything for a while. Like we had a wedding 2 weeks ago out of town, and I have a little bit of a cold now from that because a lot of our friends have kiddos and stuff. So I was like, if we don't get COVID, that'll be great. Like it's a cold, it's fine, whatever, you know. But we did that, and then we had like basically nothing for like a week and a half, which was kind of intentional because we're like, if we're gonna be around 100 people, we don't want to be like bringing, like it was very everybody's vaccinated. It was the whole thing. Yeah. You had to like send your card to be able to go, you know. So it was like very official. But it was like coming back from that, we were like, well, we don't want to like expose anybody else if we've just been around all of these people. And also I was just like, like, that was a lot. We were around people for like 4 days, wedding, all this kind of stuff. And like, I came home and I was like, going back into like I feel like I've like transitioned into being like an introvert or something. And I'm like, maybe this is my new sanctuary. I don't know. Well, so I think I do want to be in the world. It's just like, you know, in bits and pieces when I choose to, you know?
Yes. And I mean, like that is kind of the introvert. It's funny when I think of, you know, doing things with people now, and it's like small, you know, it'll be like with one person or like 2 people. And then all of a sudden there'll be like 3 things in a week that is still like 1 or 2 people, but they feel really exhausting, and I can like feel that the muscles in my face are not used to just like interacting and reacting to other people that much, you know, like my muscles are really tired. And and then, you know, there'll be like something that I get invited to and I bail last minute, and I'm like, oh yeah, pre-COVID, this is also what I did. Like sometimes I have all the energy in the world, and I find that especially like pride really brings this out for me, where it's like pride is out. So like especially when I'm like in Halifax for it, I'm like, okay, I'm like gonna go to drag shows, I'm gonna like go to the parade, I'm gonna, you know, have fun and like go to house parties and stuff like that. All of this obviously pre-COVID, because I also haven't been home to catch book tuck since COVID. But like that's, you know, it's like pretty much a week in a year, and then maybe like one other week a few months later where I'm like, I really want to go dancing. Like I really want to go to a drag show. And I like go and I like have a lot of fun. Maybe I like do 2 or 3 things in that week. And then I retreat again.
Yeah. And I think that's like so important. And one of the other things that I think has become like really important for me, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I think that there's this idea that once you're an adult, like you like forget to have fun, like, or like the only definition of fun is like going for drinks with friends, which is fun. Like that's fun, that's great. And I love socializing, I love talking to people, but one of the things that came up for me, like at the beginning of last year, when anybody who pays attention to the news might have noticed that things were a little crazy in the United States in January. And so some things happened. We don't want to talk about it, but I was feeling very anxious, and I just kind of had this idea and started writing the one day. And I was like sitting in front of my computer being like, ah! Like just like typing away and like cracking up at myself. And I was like, I forgot that like this is something I used to do for fun. Like when I was really young, I did it all the time. My mom has like fake Goosebumps books that I wrote and illustrated. Yeah, they're still around somewhere. So, and then as I got older, like I took a bunch of like writing electives in college, and like it never really, I think because again, it's kind of like the trick of capitalism is like, how do you make money off of everything, and anything that you're not making money off of is not like worthwhile or not worth time, or you can only make time for it if you've already done all your money making activities.
Which, when you're also running a small business, you're never done. There is always
Exactly.
it to do. And like when you finally like finish off your official to-do list, that's when you go to the backlog and you're like, okay, I had all these other projects that are just like, yeah, you're literally never done.
Yeah. And that was the thing. And I was like, I like literally have forgotten how to have fun. Unless like somebody else is like making me have fun. you know, like, this is terrible. What the hell is wrong with me? Like I should be more easygoing, like all things considered. Um, but I think that I kind of had this revelation when I started doing that, that this was kind of like a retreat. It was like a thing I kept going back to when I felt like my mind couldn't quite settle. And I would go there and I would just kind of be in this different world. I got really into reading again, which again I'd fallen off of because it's just for fun, like this is just something I do for fun. And so I've really found a lot of sanctuary in that over the past, year and a half, whatever it is now, to the point where I'm halfway through my sixth book, like novel, which is crazy. And they're not all like finished or published or anything like that. Like we're working on it, but like it was one of those things where I don't know, like I think I didn't realize how much I needed it until I started doing it. And then it really did become a sanctuary of like, okay, like I'm feeling this thing today, or I'm having anxiety about this today. And like, how can I like process this in a way that feels safe and feels like I can get it all out without judgment and without whatever else. And so I think I thought about writing like poetry and stuff like that way, but I never thought about like writing fiction that way. And I was like, wow, I'm just like airing out a lot of grievances in these books. Like I'm airing out a lot of my own shit here. And it's not like I'm the character or anything. It's just like there's these different scenarios. And I'll never forget, I was writing this one scene and I think everybody has had that experience of being in a relationship where you kind of know that you have reached the end of a relationship, and you know if that one other person would make like this one change, or like they do this one thing, like why can't you just give me this one thing so that everything would be fine? And I was writing this scene like that, and I was just like I was like processing all of like my past relationships or something. And he walked in as I'm like crying over my laptop, and was just like, all right, I'll come back later, like, and I was like, I'm clearly working through some stuff, but it has been like really cathartic and really joyful and a place to kind of retreat. And I think that that's one of the things that we forget when it comes to sanctuary and when we're adults, and especially like, when you're a parent, when you're like responsible for everybody else's fun, it's one of the things that kind of gets lost. And I think it's so important, especially now, like what is making you feel joyful? What is making you feel like you have that safe place to kind of go to for all of those things and to do something that is just for fun?
Yes, I absolutely, like, I mean, writing is definitely one of my sanctuaries. I don't get it, like, it's so easy to go just down like a hole and spend 8 hours just like writing for me. But music, I would say, is the thing that is everything that you were just explaining with your writing is where I go when I'm singing. And I literally used to sing 5 or 6 hours a day, every single day, in organized singing between all the choirs and musicals and voice lessons that I was doing. And then all of the unstructured time, I was still singing. Like I was the kid who was like painting a mural in the hallway and had like teachers popping their heads out and being like, can you please sing quieter? I'm trying to teach them.
I sing stuff around the house about like what I'm doing all the time too.
Yeah, exactly. And I miss it. And part of me is like, okay, I really want to like find a choir. And that is hard to do. And, COVID also complicated that.
Right.
But even just like switching from listening to, a true crime podcast, which has become a little bit too much of my normally, and switching over to listening to music and singing along with songs is
Yeah.
it's so cathartic for me. I'm seeing somebody was like, I love driving down the country road with the windows down and singing really badly, really loudly.
Yes. Hell yes.
And somebody else, I sing when I'm angry or stressed about work. That's a really good idea. Yes, I find that I often like, see, the other thing for me is that I will quite regularly um, be like, whatever mood I'm in, then I'm either listening to a certain song or album, but like, especially I'll like get into a kind of a mood and have just one song on repeat. And then I am
Yeah.
singing on repeat. And I'm like, well, Willow's the only one who can hear me right now, other than anybody who's like walking past.
I
And
relate.
over it, like, it,
Yeah. And also, again, not to be like that person, but from an energetic perspective, when you sing, you're automatically moving energy around your body. And so I find with a lot of clients who are experiencing anxiety, it tends to be between like kind of like the heart, the throat, and like the head. And when you sing, you're kind of naturally forcing energy to move through your body. And if you're singing properly, like somebody who's trained like yourself, where you're taking like deeper breaths and you're grounding down and you're standing properly and all of that stuff, exactly, then you're actually getting kind of the whole energetic system on board. And I actually used to sing before COVID. I would do a energy work, like a restorative yoga and energy work class with one of my friends, and I always went and prepared the room ahead of time, and I would sing in the room ahead of time to kind of help clear the energy in the room too, because I think that's like a big thing. Yeah.
oh man, I need to just like find like a great big garden labyrinth to just like walk around while I sing songs. I think this is like, that's kind of that's my pre-built sanctuary right there.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite tarot card? And also what tarot card, if it's probably different, but what's your favorite tarot card right now? And then also what tarot card do you think like most embodies the concept of sanctuary?
Oh my gosh. That's really funny.
I would love to come and sing in somebody's backyard. Somebody here is saying I can come and sing.
We're gonna request just like joy carols, just like walk around the neighborhood and sing. I'm like fully on board. If people came to my door singing, I'd be very excited.
Oh,
Mike would be like, "What is going on?" And I'd be like, "This is great. Let's tip them."
this is actually like normal, so I could actually make that.
Okay. I think for me, I mean, I've always been really into the star card. It's like one of my favorite cards. I think it's a super important card in terms of sanctuary. I have to think about it a little bit if I would like have that be the best sanctuary card. But I do think there's some really powerful stuff about it, about your ability not just to heal in general, but to be a part of that healing and to to empower yourself to be a part of that and to not necessarily need to, it's not that you can't outsource or that it isn't helpful to outsource or to have a therapist or friends or whoever, and all these different modalities, but also that you are the person that's at the center of that and you're directing that. And even if you feel like you don't know what you're doing, you always have the opportunity to kind of participate in your own healing, even if it's just selecting the right person to like lead you through that day,
Yeah.
And then in terms of sanctuary, I think it really depends on the person, right? So I think if you are a person who is like deeply creative, an artist, a creator of any kind, it might be like the Magician, which is a card that really feels like you're able to channel those ideas and bring them down to earth and put them into the real world. But maybe you are a big community person, and then it could be something like the Three of Cups, where having those like-minded people, like you were talking about pride, I always think of pride when I think of the Three of Cups. Like to me, like I don't know why, but I think of that as like the pride card, and it's not like particularly flashy, but it's the fact that it's like these people who are kind of in community celebrating and like supporting each other and being like in this group of supportive, like-minded people. And I always think of that card when I think of Pride. It was funny. I was like thinking about that during Pride. I was like, oh, this is so interesting. But yeah, I think there can be like a lot of different cards, and also like you know, even the cards that are, you know, scary or like that people shy away from a little bit, like the death card, can be a sanctuary for people who are like, I am so sick of the status quo. I'm so sick of the way things are. And I'm ready to change, or like I'm really ready to change, or you know, those crazy people who I just don't understand, but just like can't stand things being the same forever, you know, and just like the constant change, because that is the type of person. And I'm like, that person is going to find a lot of sanctuary in the death card and be like, yeah, we're moving and shaking, we're changing, nothing's staying the same, you know. I know, honestly, no, not my cup of tea either. Um, but I do think there's that, and then even like the devil card, you know, which confronts us with a lot of our own cycles and a lot of our own shame and stuff like that. But I also think like one of the things that I have noticed this year in a lot of like, there's a theme that's kind of been running through a lot of the readings I've been doing, which is that people feel stuck and like they can't quite figure out where to go next, or they're just really burned out. And the devil card has been coming up a lot. And the devil card is really about, you know, shame and trying to kind of end these cycles. But I also think there's something about it that's like, we're all in like the same place. And like, when you're in that kind of struggle, sometimes the only comfort that really exists is knowing that you're not the only one. And I do think that there can be sanctuary in that card too, you know, and I really think a lot of it is about personality and where you are and what's going on in your life. And even like people dealing with like addiction and stuff, like that's like a big devil card energy. And like, you know, AA is a huge community of people, and that is a sanctuary, you know. And like I think there are so many different ways to look at that, and sometimes the sanctuary is just like in being honest with yourself about like where you are. And that's why I'm like, it's so hard to say like one particular card, you know.
That's so interesting. Like, especially looking at it through the different forms of sanctuary. Like, Three of Cups for me is like so grounding, and absolutely it ties into like my personal concept of pride and like the things
Yeah,
that I love most. Like, I don't give a fuck about like all of the, you know, corporate, you know, like
right.
schmutz hand out at the parade, or like the political parties that are actively fighting against our rights that then like march during the parade. I'm like, fuck you. But for me, pride has always been like gathering with community, being able to see people who like otherwise often honestly hide themselves, like a good
Right.
and us coming together in like a really beautiful and like openly queer way in like large numbers, which is so grounding and reaffirming every year. And then yeah, interesting with the devil card. Like for me, I have a fairly funny relationship with the devil card, because I think it's like it gives me like big Scorpio energy, where it's like
Yeah.
yes, but really fucking smart, and also um misunderstood. I think like the devil card to me, I'm always like, I when it pulls up in a reading, it's also potentially just because I'm like, let's like play with some temptations. But like it's I don't have, I should maybe have a little bit more kind of not guards up, but like be a little bit more cautious when it appears. But I'm like, this is great, hi, let's go play. And just that's a good idea, but it happens. And then the magician card totally makes sense, where for creatives, because it is so action oriented, and it is
Yeah.
reminding us that you have the tools at your disposal already, and now you get to use them. Now you get to like do what you need to. And it's so interesting because I recently, like a day and a half ago pulled some cards and was like, what's the next action I need to take? And the magician came up and I was like, oh, right. Okay. Which nice because the rest of the pull was a lot more like structured, but also not necessarily calming. It was like there was emperor energy and strength energy, and I was like, nah, I don't know. But then the magician felt like, oh, okay, we can like these other things are going to be structured and a little bit like more, I don't know, solid than potentially am able to see them as being right now. But the magician feels like kind of permission to just like trust the process and actively step into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's so, it's so important. And it's very, it's funny to me too, because like I said, I've been writing all these different things and I've been switching from like editing mode to drafting mode. And it's very hard to go from like a fifth draft of something that's like pretty, you know, polished, you know, it's not perfect, but like it's pretty polished. And then to be like drafting and just accepting the fact that like it's not all gold. Like what's coming through is just like some of it is just like hot garbage, but like it's fine because it's gonna get fixed later. And it's more important, like if you don't have anything down on the page, then you can't edit anything. And I think that's really true, like whatever form of creativity you're talking about. There can be like this sense of like perfectionism. I can't start until I know the exact thing. And I feel like the magician is this permission to make messy things and to make bad things bad, and to make things that are in some way like imperfect, you know, just so that you can get that exercise of like trusting what comes through. And there might only be like a couple moments of brilliance in that artwork that you create or whatever, but they're there. And then it's like you're building out from there. And it's like a muscle, you know, like I think like intuition, creativity is the same, where the more you trust and the more you use it, the better you get at recognizing what needs to go, what needs to stay, and being able to trust whatever is coming through, you know?
Yes. Speaking of which, there's somebody who's like scooting along on the back of my neck right now, which is quite fun. They're like, yes, we'll see what that integrates a little later. But yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. And like my brain is still thinking about magician as you were saying that, because it's like the energy is quite similar to the fool in that it's fresh and you're stepping into something, but whereas the fool feels like, okay, you've got the opportunity to do something new, it's directionless at that point, which is kind of the point, right? Like it's the beginning of the cycle. You're just like, okay, there's something new in front of me. But the magician is much more action oriented, where it's like, okay, you've got something new and now do it. Like you have
Yeah.
what to start. Whereas the fool is
Yeah.
like opening, and then the magician is
Right.
make use of that opening.
Right. And I think of like the fool as like surrender. It's the thing where you're like, okay, I'm gonna try this thing. Like it was me sitting down and being like, hey, I had this weird idea. I'm gonna like start writing. Like I had no idea. And I laugh now because the first book I wrote is a high fantasy book, which is like ignorance is bliss. I had no idea what I was doing. And if I had known, I probably would have not written that. But that's the full thing, because it's like that. I had no idea how much work that was. And I just kind of like surrendered and was just like, yeah, whatever. And then the magician is almost like when you're directly like, okay, like we've got the beginning of this and we've started something, but like, how do we continue this? Or how do we carry this through to the end? Like, how do I take what was like just me like fucking around on my laptop for like a couple minutes and writing a couple thousand words to like a full book? And like, how do you make the time to like actually tune into that and make it part of your day? Because I think like, to bring it back to this idea of sanctuary, it's how are you making space and time for that? Because I think that is the thing that is trickiest in this day and age, is like, how do you make the time for this, and how do you make this a priority when there are so many other things vying for your attention? And I think that that is the part that is part of where the magician comes in, because it's like, how are you making this space for whatever idea to come and be pushed into the world and be like created, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Like prioritizing that energy and allowing it to take up the space that it needs to in your life, whatever it's being put. I've got a note here that my audio is cutting in and out. Is it cutting in and out for you? Are you able to hear me consistently?
I can hear you consistently. Yeah.
I like never know with this shit when it's like
Listen.
not
Yeah.
ever. But
Yeah.
semi-behaving for us this week, so we're just gonna keep going with it. Yeah, all of this makes so much sense, and my brain is just like, and my, I was gonna say my gremlins. They're not my gremlins. They're my other creatures, but they're also kind of noodling around on it, and on my back. So if you were to pull a card right now for what you think the world could use as sanctuary energy in this moment, what card would that be, do you think?
Oh, man, that is such a good question. I think that what's kind of coming to mind to me is almost like Two of Cups, which I really think of as like an emotionally supportive partnership. So sometimes it's romantic, and theoretically it would be great if your relationship was emotionally supportive. I would hope people have that. But I also think it's about kind of this exchange of compassion and understanding. So you're not just offering that person, you know, emotional honesty or support for what they're feeling, but you're also offering them the benefit of the doubt. Um, and I feel like that is something that, particularly in the US, but I think everywhere, people are struggling with a lot, is connecting with that sense of compassion and being able to take action from it. So it doesn't mean that you have to be nice to everyone, like, frankly, because there are people stirring up some shit and they don't necessarily deserve it. But I think, like, what I have noticed is that people who have a hard time doing that also have a hard time doing it with themselves or accepting it from other people for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we embrace that, and when we can show up really graciously for our friends and be really kind to our friends, and then like still struggle to be kind to ourselves in that same way, but it comes so naturally everywhere else. I would like to see people embrace that feeling of the Two of Cups more, where you can not just give it but receive it. Maybe that's also like a little bit of Six of Cups too, kind of mixed in there, of this ability to kind of like give and take things and to feel worthy of receiving that kind of emotional support. Because I think a lot of that resentment that comes up from people is because they want that too, and they like don't feel worthy of it, or nobody has told them that they're worthy of it, and it feels like you need to be in competition for it instead of like in community for it, like you were saying.
Oh my God. All of that is just ringing so like true, close to home lately. It's such like a, like we know that scarcity mindset serves us not at all, and we know that there are ways to like be bound, well, in theory we know that there are ways to be boundaried and also be loving and compassionate
Right.
and supportive, and it's so true that, but I mean, like the like kind of flippant way of saying it is hurt people, but it's true. Where like when we are having a hard time, like offering love to ourselves and offering compassion to ourselves, it makes it much easier to also not trust when other people are offering us love and to believe that that's coming from. And when we find those people and when we find those communities where we do feel safe enough, and I guess this is another form of sanctuary, where we do feel safe enough to be able to go into that mess and be supported in that mess. There's so much value in it, and unfortunately it's like not as common, I think, as ideally it would be, but it allows us to be so much better resourced, even if the actual physical resources that we have are stretched or not as much as we would want. um the ability to like trust that somebody else is engaging with us in good faith, and that also we can do the same with them, is just like totally what the world needs right now.
Yeah.
A lot of things feel stagnant, so what would that be? SSDD energy, what is that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the SSDD. So feel free to expand on that or expand on that in the comments. But yeah, that's a really good question as well. What would be a card that would feel like oh, same shit, different day? Yeah, totally, absolutely.
I mean, honestly, I would say the death card. I mean, you know, it's it's funny because I think sometimes there's that same shit different day kind of energy, where you need to say like, okay, like what is it that needs to, I say death over tower because I prefer not to have like my life upended, but maybe you need tower energy. Tower's very fast. I think like when I think of those two cards and I think of the differences between them, I think that there's a real intentionality with the death card where you can kind of be in communion with it and say like, okay, like I'm ready to make this transition with work, or I'm ready for my days to be less monotonous, and what do I need to let go of, or what do I need to like. I always think of death as reinvention. Like, what do I need to reinvent to come into like a new place?
Yeah.
Where the tower is like very expedient. It's like the scalpel versus the sledgehammer, like I think like the tower is like really gonna like wallop you. It's like not most people's preferred method of shaking things up. But it certainly has its purpose, and not all tower things are bad things. I mean, we've talked about it in our group chat quite a lot, how I think one of the most tower things is having a baby. It's like it's wonderful, like good for you. It's very exciting, but like that, you can't tell me that doesn't upend your whole life and change literally everything. I mean, that baby is in charge now. Like there's a dictator in your life, and it is a baby. And I think that when you have that kind of same shit, different day kind of energy, the death card can be really helpful. I also think that that sense of embodying like curiosity around it, like how can I invite change, or where am I feeling like the impulse to change, or where am I feeling like most comfortable with change. The Chariot card, which is another one that's like, how do I get from like here to there?
I feel like I don't with the Chariot as much. I like don't have a strong relationship with it at this point.
I think it's one of the trickiest cards. I think it's one of the ones that people have like the most questions around. Like the Chariot and the Judgment card are like two that I feel like people are always really like wary about. And I think it's funny because I think when Erin and Davis were doing their like major arcana Kickstarter campaign, like it was I think those were two of the ones that were just like last, because I had messaged Davis and I was literally like, I'll do whatever card, just like I picked my favorites or whatever, but I was like, I'll literally do whatever card, just tell me what like nobody else wants to do. And she was like, literally no one wants to do Judgment. And I was like, I'm on board. Judgment and the Emperor. And I was like, I'll do both of them, I don't care. But I think that there's this idea that like of how to move expediently from this sense of like I'm stuck in the mud to just somewhere else. I think it doesn't even need to be super specific, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Chariot is like, I mean, I would say it's a little bit of a Pandora's box, so like be careful what you wish for in terms of like leaving things open-ended. But if you're just like, hey, I need to change this up, I think that's one of the cards you can work with. And then the other thing that comes up when things feel stagnant like that is, especially when I hear the word stagnant, I think of the Hanged One. And that is a card that can be frustrating, especially for people like us who like to do. But the purpose of the card, and usually when that comes up in a reading for me, is about getting perspective. And so there might be a reason why you feel like you're in neutral. And that could be about getting perspective. It could be about giving you the sanctuary, if you'll permit me to use it, the sanctuary of like things remaining stable and kind of in the same place so that you can figure out who you are or who you want to be next. So that can be like an interesting card to embody in terms of saying like, okay, like what is this trying to teach me right now? Or like, what do I have to learn from this experience, you know?
Yeah, I think like I appreciate the Hanged One weirdly. As somebody who is so action oriented, I do appreciate that the Hanged One is basically like a moment to just kind of like settle and recalibrate and kind of like absorb things, as long as it's not like ongoing Hanged One energy. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
person, I have some feels about it. But
Yeah. And
yeah,
that was one of the funny things about doing a bunch of readings leading up to COVID is obviously I've never read about like some like giant like worldwide event. And I do have clients all over the world, you know, but I kept pulling the Hanged One readings and I was like, what is this about? This is so weird. Like I almost never pulled that card like before that. And I kept like pulling it in these client readings. And again, I'm doing all of this career stuff and I'm like, what is this? And then COVID happened and I was like, oh, that's why I kept pulling the Hanged One. It's so weird. I kept pulling the Hanged One and the Eight of Wands reversed, which have like a similar energy. And I was like, this is bizarre. I don't know why everybody's like kind of like stuck, like in like again, that like neutral feeling in their careers. So that was like a kind of a funny Hanged One moment.
that that and creepy. So we're at time. I just realized. No, I have no.
I know.
So, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us around Sanctuary, and then also, obviously, where can people find you and book you and all of those?
Yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, learning, like I said, like paying attention to joy, finding those moments of joy, even if it's something, again, like even if you're like, oh, this is so stupid. Like I literally I'm in the process of writing the fourth book in my fantasy series about a memory witch. Like I wasn't like I was just like, this is just this weird idea that I had, this dumb thing. Like, and it's been really fun, but like pay attention to those things that just feel like goofy and joyful. Because like I said, I was just like tapping away at my computer, like laughing my ass off at like how clever I am, you know? But I also think like pay attention to those things in your life because that's often where that sense of sanctuary is coming. So if it's like, you know, they have all these adult coloring books now and like new branches into like creativity and things that are just for fun. And it doesn't have to mean like spending a ton of money or doing something like that. Like there are so many things that you can do and learning to have that sense of retreat. I think that tarot is an excellent form of sanctuary and checking in with yourself. And I'm very excited for this book. I think it was like the best like rebellion against, you know, COVID and just all of the bullshit of the last 2 years. So I'm like very excited for this community and this book and all of this stuff. It's like I'm pumped about it. And people can find me here on Instagram at Star Sage Spirit. And I have a booking link in my profile if you would like to book a session. And then I also have my website, which is starsagespirit.com, and you can read more about all the different readings. And if you like podcasts, my podcast, Living Tarot, is available wherever you listen to podcasts, and Ash has been on a really, really fun episode, and I talk about how different people embody the tarot and sort of like practical uses for the tarot, which can kind of, again, like I said, be a form of creating sanctuary for yourself. So
I love it so much, and I adore you.
I adore you.
And absolutely delightful. We could talk forever, honestly.
I know.
Subject other people to that.
This is great. I know. Have me back anytime. I love talking about this stuff. So
This has been super fun. And tomorrow we're going to be back for another sanctuary chat with Siri Vincent Pluff, the Northern Lights witch themselves.
Oh, that's great.
Super fun. And then you can find the Sanctuary Hub at ashalberg.com/sanctuary. Right now, we are getting ready. Speaking of getting creative energy back up and running, we've got the Creative Coven Challenge coming up this upcoming week. You can do it 24/7. The exercises are there 24/7. But we're going to be doing our live round that is a special sanctuary theme next week. And so our kind of kickoff will be on Monday, and then we'll have Zoom meetings throughout the week to check in and see where everyone's progress is at and answer questions and have all of that fun. And I already have been scheming what my swatches are going to be this time. So yes, I'm very excited about that. I am very excited about your books and also about my and just delighted with all of these things. Now I'm thinking of like adding creative writing into the sanctuary book. Oh God, whole other. And I'm like, I have a whole other idea that would be fun. Ugh. This has been so much fun, my love. Thank you, Sheila, and everyone. We will be back tomorrow with Siri and chat soon. Thanks, everyone.